SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Did you know Toyota of Brookhaven has sold more new vehicles the last 2 years than any other dealership in Southwest Mississippi? Come see why. Exit 40 Brookhaven or online at ToyotaBrookhaven.com. Great service, great savings. At Toyota of Brookhaven, we deliver.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Midday Super Talk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine musing. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy.
Well, I left my headset in the car. I'm going to go get it. And, of course, I would pick one up in the studio here that evidently has a short in it, so I don't have any sound coming through my right ear. I'm simply hearing the buzz out of the left ear. So I played with it, the jack a little bit in the cord. You know, sometimes, there we go. See, sometimes these things get a little short in them. Oh, man. They're not very durable, are they? These things. They don't last very long.
Well, it's a double whammy if they're not very durable and they're not well treated.
Well, that's true. That's a good point. So I suspect it's that winding the cord so tight around the actual earpieces themselves that caused the problem. We're all buckled up here, ready to go in the Element Wealth Studio. Man, oh man, lots of stuff happening across these United States. First, I got to start with a little shout-out, and that, once again, is to Max Howell, who came by to see me at Itawamba Community College on Friday. I appreciate that from Max. He is a radio personality himself, of course, besides being a successful business person, a football coach, a football player. He played football at Troy University over in Alabama. He called me this morning by mistake, Rhino. You know, the old butt call deal. He called me, and so I called him back, and he apologized for that, which I appreciate. No problem. I think we've all had that experience before, the sensitivity of the screens on our phones. Sometimes we'll do that. But I told him that I wanted to share with him, didn't get a chance to say this to him on Friday, that when he used to be one of the co-hosts on the radio program Conference Call back in the late 90s, that was the way I kept up with and connected to my home state here. A big, certainly, sports fan, and football season in particular was always intriguing. And so I was in New Jersey. I was traveling Monday through Friday, working up there at the New Jersey Department of Corrections. Big project we had going on, 1998 through 2000, the middle of 2000. And this is just when you were starting to have certain radio programs, radio stations that were available via the Internet. You remember the old broadcast.com, which was invented by Mark Cuban. Now, today, that's nothing, right? We've got apps and full-size browsers, and you can get any dang station, it seems like, known to man, on your phone via the Internet or certainly your full-size computer. But that was sort of revolutionary back then.
At the time, it felt like you were literally living in the future because you put a series of numbers and symbols into a Winamp program and outspit a radio broadcast from halfway around the world.
That's precisely right. that was revolutionary technology of the day. And, of course, it made Mark Cuban a fortune is what it did. He involved in creating that technology, developing that technology, and then he, of course, sold it out to Yahoo, broadcast.com, to Yahoo for what, $3.3 billion, I believe. And, of course, the rest is history. But nonetheless, the, I believe, conference call aired every day at 5 o'clock Central Time. That was 6 o'clock where I was. Now, that was about half of my day back racing against the clock to remedy a major Y2K problem that the Department of Corrections had in their systems, and not getting that problem fixed by the change of the century was going to be catastrophic in a correctional environment. But nonetheless, I so enjoyed Max and the late Scott McKinney and their broadcast. Just entertaining and a way to connect to home and keep up. Again, we don't think much about that today, but 25, 7, 8 years ago, that was a big deal. Appreciate that, Max, and thank you for coming by. By the way, Itawamba, always exciting to be on the campus for graduation, watching all the graduates come across the stage with Dr. Jay Allen, the president of Itawamba Community College, handing them their diplomas. They're all excited, celebrating. So are their families. Big deal. Always fun. Enjoyed that. Thanks to them for having us up. So we're watching politics today. In particular, how about that race in Louisiana? You know, Louisiana goes to the polls on Saturdays. And this, I believe, Rhino, is the first election they've had in quite some time where they had partisan primaries. Louisiana has had the jungle primary system for quite some time. I believe that just changed. Law changed earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken. And so partisan primaries were conducted on Saturday rather than all candidates representing all parties or no party, independents, all on the ballot at the same time. If one receives 50% plus one of the votes, they advance.
Yeah,
they win.
The closed primaries were enacted in 2024, or they became law in 2024. They were enacted this year.
Okay. So I believe this was the first go at it. And why that's important is because it pitted incumbent Senator Bill Cassidy. He was on the ballot on the Republican primary, and he went down. He lost. He is not someone who I think is going to be on the Donald Trump Christmas card list, fair to say. And so the president was in the court of his opponent, and that would be Representative Letlow. So he lost his Letlow, pardon me, I mispronounced it. So he lost his bid for re-election, and it wasn't close. Julia Letlow, the president's chosen candidate, finished quite a bit ahead. She received 45% of the vote. Now, that's short of winning the primary outright. John Fleming, the state's treasurer, also a former Trump administration official, he actually beat Mr. Cassidy to finish second with 25% of the vote. The senator running for re-election received roughly 25% of the vote. So 45, 28, 25. Wow. So Bill Cassidy, he goes down. He ain't going back. Mr. Trump celebrated this outcome on social media. He wrote that, quote, Mr. Cassidy's disloyalty to the man who got him elected is now a part of legend, and it's nice to see that his political career is, in all caps, over. So you could notch that one up as the latest victory in the president's campaign of political retribution against certain Republicans who have confronted him, contended with him, defied him. They blocked challengers in Indiana. These would be state lawmakers who weren't on board with his call for redistricting. What was that, like 6 of 7, I think, Rhino, that unseated incumbents in the state Senate? I think it was the state Senate. May have been a combination of the Senate and the House. It doesn't matter. The vast majority of those who, again, were not in favor of the president's call for redistricting in the state legislature there in Indiana, they were taken out by strong challengers who vowed to, in fact, pursue the Trump.
It was 7 incumbent senators and 1 incumbent representative.
Okay, 7 in the Senate, 1 on the House side, and I believe 6 of 7, right? 1 ousting incumbents of the total 7 or total 8?
Total 8.
Total 8. Okay, that's the way it went down. We are stepping aside right now. I'm going to see if I can run to the parking lot and get my headset because this one's driving me crazy with no sound in the right ear. We've got Senator Jeremy England on the program at 11:05. Stay with us. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Now back to Middays with Gerard here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Okay, now I'm out of breath. You knew that was going to happen. But we are back. So, and then tomorrow, speaking of political races, where the president is getting involved, it's Thomas Massie. The congressman from the great state of Kentucky. The president, no fan of his. And he's in a bit of a fight for his life as well. How long has he been there? 5, 6 terms?
His 6th term, I think.
That's what comes to mind as well. He has historically opposed much of the president's agenda. Same as Rand Paul, the Kentucky senator. What is it about Kentucky? I mean, both of them would describe themselves as libertarians, I guess, right? Though they run as Republicans. And then you got Cassidy in Louisiana. The big problem there was he voted to convict the president in the Senate after the impeachment articles were passed in the House. And so the president said, uh-oh, you're out of here. And he is, man. He ain't going to be back. I don't think. You think he'll run again? Doubtful.
He'll probably start a leadership committee so he can funnel money to it.
That's probably right.
Have to deal with
PAC.
More of the slings and arrows of politicking.
Yeah, I think that's right. Now, I haven't seen the polls on Massie.
There was one that's been released in the last 24, 36 hours that has him down by about 5 points.
Okay. The president said on his social media to Kentuckians that would be voting for the Representative Thomas Massie in his district, he says, Kentucky comma, get this in all caps, loser out of politics. He doesn't mince any words, does he? I'm not sure I've ever seen a president have such outsized influence on elections across the states. Can you remember?
Not on the Republican side, not since I've been alive.
That's a good way to put it. Not on the Republican side. I think
because Obama
right.
had pretty big swing on the Democrat side.
He did. And apparently he's hanging around Washington a lot. He's still heavily involved. I mean, he's the god of the Democrat Party, would you say? And honestly, with respect to his profile, his communication skills, he's probably the best they've had in quite some time. Now, I don't agree with many of his policies, though they look sort of sanguine by today's standards, do they not? I mean, I got into a bit of a social media dust-up with someone about him, and he's becoming, talking about Obama, more popular with his acolytes out there in the internet world. And they're lauding him and praising him. And you see this over and over where they try to go through this litany of accomplishments, except they're wrong about most of it. They embellish, they stretch. Here's the truth. Obama served for 8 years, 2 terms. He had an aggressive agenda, but there were 3 key elements of that agenda. One was the Affordable Care Act, health care reform, let's call it that. He made that clear on the campaign trail. I've shared before, that's what drew me into politics, was hearing him talk about so-called shared responsibility, which sounded like something I needed to know about as an employer. And after digging, I found out, yeah, I'm right. Unfortunately, what this guy wants to do with respect to employer shared responsibility as it relates to employee health coverage is fairly radical and would have cost my company a bunch of money. Not that we weren't providing market competitive benefits. Of course, you have to, or you don't hire anybody. Let the market figure that out. But he wanted to dictate and mandate that employers pick up far more of that coverage than they typically do, certainly than we do. And I've done the math on that. And honestly, this is what I think the average person that is not behind the checkbook, if you will, in a company, maybe doesn't appreciate. And I'm not trying to say that in a negative way. It's just I feel like you got to be in those shoes, sit in that chair to appreciate it, which is, I'm thinking about making some investments here, hiring some people, buying some more hardware, software. You can go down the list. Adding a new product line, expanding it into a new branch, new line of business. I think I'm going to wait on that until I have some clarity. It's what I call faith, confidence, and certainty. That's what drives investment, hiring, and expansion. Simple as that. Well, when he was running and hearing him talk about what he wanted employers to cough up, shared responsibility. It sounds so virtuous, though, doesn't it? So innocuous, so harmless. It's just your shared responsibility. It was enough when I did the math on it to say, I'm not going to make any of those investments until I understand what the heck's going to happen. Now, what ultimately happened was we got legislation that was far less oppressive to employers than what he wanted. Even the Democrats wouldn't sign off on that. Of course, you also have to keep in mind that on a very untimely basis, the lion of the Senate, Senator Ted Kennedy, passed away. Remember that, abruptly, in December of 2009. Thus, the Democrats' supermajority filibuster-proof in the Senate was eliminated. And they had to settle for legislation passed through reconciliation, which was a significantly diluted version of what they wanted. I don't know, Rhino, that many people realize that what they wanted, you know this, and what they got. There's a Grand Canyon between those. Now, I'm not saying they still don't want that, because you know they do. It's more akin to full-fledged socialized medicine. It's what they want. But they couldn't get that through. That's because Ted Kennedy, who spent his career advocating for health care reform. It was ironic. The very person who probably focused on that issue in his family more than anybody passed away, thus eliminating the prospect of passing such sweeping radical legislation. Nonetheless, that was his number one. Number two, something you don't hear anything about today, card check. You remember that, right? So one was health care reform, two was card check, three was cap and trade. Now, what always amuses me is how the left in this country, which of course hold Barack Obama up as the god of the Democrat Party, they praise him on his energy policy. You've seen this. And how that brought the price down of energy. Yet they fail to acknowledge, no, what he wanted stopped just short of what Joe Biden said, which is, we're going to kill the fossil fuels industry. He got that started with his cap and trade. And all that really means, folks, you've helped me explain this before, Rhino. It's a system of credits and debits, if you will. Think about money going into your bank account, money coming out, but instead of it being money, it's carbon. It's a measure of carbon. So everybody gets a certain amount that they can emit, and if you fall short of that, you can actually sell or trade your excess to others who need it because they produce more than they're supposed to. I'm describing that fairly accurately. Yeah. That's what's called cap and trade. It would have devastated the energy industry, yet they take victory laps. The reason the price of energy declined is because the economy was in the tank after the banking meltdown. We had like 10% unemployment. Nobody could afford to buy gas. That'll get the price down. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
From the Seabrook. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert, here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Hello world, here's a song that we're singing. Come on, get happy. A whole lot of loving is what we'll be bringing. We'll make you happy. We had a dream, we'd go traveling together. We'd spread a little love and then we'll keep moving on. Something always happens whenever we're together.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays from the Element Wealth studio. Appreciate you joining us today. So, the money in politics is something we've discussed many times on this program. It just seems like it's out of control, honestly. We've seen massive amount of dollars flow into very hotly contested races. I think the U.S. Senate race in 24 in Ohio set the record. About $460 million dumped into that one. But the Tar Heel state of North Carolina says, hold my beer there, Buckeye State. There is a race going on in North Carolina to take Senator Tom Tillis's seat. He has announced, it's been a year or so ago, his retirement. And so it looks like that particular race is really heating up, and it features Michael Whatley, the Republican nominee, and former governor, Democrat Roy Cooper of North Carolina. Currently, Cooper has a fairly commanding lead in the race. Latest polls show him capturing just under 50% of the vote, Whatley at 38.7%, and then the rest say they're either unsure or they want somebody else. Now, Mr. Whatley, was he not GOP chairman at one point? Rhino, I think? National chairman? I think that's his resume, if I'm not mistaken. But that is a race that is heating up. Now, we just shared that in Ohio a couple of years ago.
Yeah, he was the one right before Ronna McDaniel.
That's right, yeah. So $460 million spent in Ohio. There are predictions that this race is going to clear $500 million. Some have even suggested that $1 billion may be spent on a U.S. Senate seat. $1 billion. Now, wasn't that roughly, I should say, not virtually, the amount of money spent in the president's 2016 campaign? It was estimated to be like $1 billion for a presidential campaign. They're talking $1 billion for a Senate seat. Now, I would say this. If the polls remain as lopsided as they are right now.
It was $1 billion total on 2016.
$1 billion total.
Trump spent $325. Hillary spent $775.
Jeez, and got beat. Outspent him by more than 2x. So I knew $1 billion was somehow connected to the race, but $1 billion total. Now we're talking same deal, $1 billion, except for a Senate seat, not the White House. That's insanity.
It was the 2024 campaign that Trump and Trump supporting super PACs raised over $1.8 billion and spent $1.6 billion.
Okay. Of course, there's some inflation you have to account for during that 8-year period as well. I get that. But can you believe this? $1 billion for a Senate seat? Again, if the polls don't improve, I would say for Mr. Whatley, I'm not sure you'll see that kind of money spent on the race. You know what I'm saying? That you get contributors and PACs and so forth that say, yeah, doesn't look like any amount of money is going to overcome that deficit. Therefore, we're going to invest elsewhere. But that does bring up the question of the Senate balance of power when it's all said and done. Now, there are all kinds of prognostications of this. But in general, there are 3 seats that are considered toss-ups. One of those is North Carolina, although that's looking more like it's going Democrat. And then Michigan and Susan Collins' seat in Maine. But here's one, Rhino, that's not being talked about that I think you could put in that category, and that's Iowa. Joni Ernst, the senator from Iowa, she's stepping down. And here's why. Iowa is an agricultural state, and I think there is some pent-up concern about the price of inputs to the agricultural production business. I don't know. Maybe that pulls Iowans into the Democrat camp. You wouldn't think that, but it's possible. The other one that's at least worth noting as a possible shot heard around the world, as the saying goes, that's Texas. Well, that kook, James Tallarico, the runoff scheduled, you looked it up for us last week on the Republican side, is it this week or is it next week?
I think it's next week.
I think you're right. That features the current sitting Senator John Cornyn from the Lone Star State. He's facing a rather strong challenge from
next Tuesday.
Texas AG Ken Paxton. This is one to keep an eye on. Whomever emerges has got to face Democrat nutcase James Tallarico. Don't underestimate this guy. Now, he's the one that says there's 6 genders. I think that the Bible actually instructs that we should support abortion. Now they got him trying to paint himself as a vegan a few years ago, and now he's running around eating turkey legs. It's just incredible how they pander and pacify and placate and just play to whomever the audience is. It's kind of sickening, isn't it? Stomach turning. And that just seems to be the way we roll in politics. There's numerous examples of that. It's Hillary and her stupid hot sauce crap, and even Biden and his accents, and Obama as well.
Can't forget Biden's corn pop stories.
That's right. And his lifeguard story.
Oh, man.
Well, but it's something to keep an eye on, for sure. But that race in North Carolina got my attention when the North Carolina press is saying, it could be $500 million. It might even be $1 billion for a Senate seat. I'm telling you, we've given too much power. There's too much opportunity for trappings and spoils and financial gain, etc. in politics. It's our fault. We did it. Because so many in our country, I don't mean to sound like I'm being condescending here or critical. We look to government too frequently, do we not, to address our concerns? On the right as well. You have to be honest. I heard the senator from Kansas. Is it Roger Smith? Is that his name? No, it's not Smith. I think Roger Smith was a longtime CEO of GM.
Roger Marshall.
Marshall. Yes, thank you. I knew it was Roger something. Pardon me on that. I heard him talking this morning. We got to address this and this and this. And I'm thinking, wait, why? Why more government? Now, if that more government is to undo government, I'm cool with that. But if it's more programs and more of this and that and the other, no, I'm not fine with that. But it's like, I agree, those are problems, but the government in general caused those problems. And now you're proclaiming that government's going to fix them. Call me skeptical of that. Man, oh man. And of course, top of mind as we approach the midterms is affordability. By the way, while we're talking about that, it was Kevin Warsh. He is now taking over at the helm of the Federal Reserve. He was approved by the full Senate last week, May 15th, his first day on the job. Now, the Fed funds rate futures market is indicating an interest rate increase this year, rather than 2 or 3 interest rate reductions, as was previously thought as we entered the year from an economics perspective. Because of this sticky and trending upward inflation, they're looking at interest rate increases. That will make the president go ballistic, there's no doubt. Stay with us. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Hello. You're listening to Middays with Gerard here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
So I didn't finish my little discussion of Barack Obama. I just got to clean that up, then we'll move on. Three main legislative priorities he had. One was health care. He got really a watered-down version of what he wanted through because, oddly enough, Senator Ted Kennedy passed away in December of 2009, unexpectedly. And then you remember they did the Bay State, Scott Brown, they had a special election. They sent him, a Republican from Massachusetts, to the Senate, and it was expressly for the purpose of killing the original Obamacare because they had experimented with something similar to that program, that model in the state when Romney was the governor. And they didn't like it. Is that not just ironic as all get out there when you think about it? A deep blue state, a senator who fought for major federal health care reform his entire career. He passes away, and they have to settle for what we got, which is crazy to think about. So it was that. It was the cap and trade, which Rhino and I explained, that relates to, of course, the use of fossil fuels and the emissions of carbon. And then the other one was card check. And that is an employment provision related to labor unions. The idea is if you go to work at a company that is looking to unionize, instead of having the ability to vote for or against unionization, in private, card check would require you to declare your position to the public, essentially, to everyone in the company, including the union thugs who would then harass you relentlessly. I'm not exaggerating here whatsoever. That's what Obama wanted. Well, after health care got passed, as you recall, in March of 2010, 9 was his first year. He got elected at 8. 9 was his first year. Kennedy dies December 2009. They have to settle for a watered-down version. They pass it in March 2010. Guess what happens then? Midterms. That's what gave rise to the Tea Party. You remember that across the country. And I can't remember. Lois Lerner, it just hit me. The IRS director, that smug, condescending attitude and facial expression she had when she was being questioned by the U.S. Senate on denying nonprofit status to conservative groups. Well, the midterms roll around in November 10, and you told us the other day, Republicans flip. It was a huge 63 seats, I believe, is what comes to mind. Barack Obama even described it as a shellacking. And then, remember, he famously said, but I have a pen and a phone, meaning I'm going to start signing executive orders like crazy. And honestly, we've never looked back in this country. We run the country through executive order. So his agenda was put on ice at that point for 6 years. So this praise and adulation of him and his legislative accomplishments, I'm saying, is horse hockey. He got two major things, really three. One was the Recovery Act is what it was called, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, ARRA. Remember the signs all over the place? And then remember the famous interview where he said, well, it wasn't as shovel-ready as we thought. Duh! Remember, it was shovel-ready projects. Now, by today's standards, it was petty cash. It was only $897 billion. When you think about the COVID relief between the president's final year of his first term, 2020, and then goofy Biden put that fuel on the fire right off the bat in 21, about $4 trillion spent under the guise of COVID relief. The American Rescue Recovery Act, I should say, 2009 was a mere $897 billion. And then the other thing was Dodd-Frank, which is the big banking reform. They thought, oh, these bankers are out there going crazy, making all these loans, taking risk that is just too much and puts the nation's economy at risk. And then they also do the leftist brag about Obama's bailing out the automobile companies, mainly GM and Chrysler. It is true. We sent a bunch of money to those companies. Now, that was necessitated by the economy tanking after the banking crash. I maintain, although the left disagrees with this, the banking crash occurred because the Democrats wanted everybody in the dang country to have a house. Doesn't matter if you can afford it, if you qualify for the loan or not, you're getting that dang house, right? It's kind of housing reparations, if you will. Now, yeah, the financial institutions, they took too much risk, but still they were forced. Fox News, SuperTalk News, then Senator England. Your Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays. We are coming at you live from the Element Wealth Studio. We're kicking off a brand new week here at Super Talk, and we now welcome Senator Jeremy England. He represents Mississippi's Senate District 51, serves as chair of the Elections Committee, vice chair, Ports and Marine Resources. Hey, Senator, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Gerard. Yeah, thanks for having me this Monday.
You bet. So, I guess the big news is that you guys have been told not to come to Jackson this coming Wednesday for what was previously called as a special session by the governor for the purpose of redrawing our Supreme Court districts. But I would say kind of an unexpected appeals court ruling says, nope, your districts are good to go. No need to put the pen to the paper to reconfigure them. So, sounds like you guys aren't coming to Jackson. I got to tell you, I was so looking forward to seeing the House in the old Capitol.
I know. How historic would that be, right? I was kind of jealous that the House got to do that, and I wouldn't get a chance to go sit in that old historic building and legislate a little bit. But maybe we can get some sort of ceremonial thing going here in the next few years. But yeah, we've got the stand down order now. We were called up, and now that has been withdrawn thanks to the Supreme Court ruling and the federal court here in Mississippi basically saying, look, we don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Well, so the other thing, you've seen this, that there are a number of folks across the Magnolia State that are calling on the governor, imploring him to call a special session to redraw our United States House districts. But thus far, I haven't seen anything out of the governor except that he wants to get it done between now and the 2027 state elections. And that could come in the form of a special session. He has the authority to call that at any point. It could come, however, in next year's 2027 legislative session. I think the president would like to see it done before the midterms, but we're not getting any indication that's going to be the case here in Mississippi. Your thoughts?
Yeah, George. So as you mentioned, I'm chairman of elections, the Senate Elections Committee. So I've had several years now to get well versed in how our elections work. And when the Supreme Court decision came down, and knowing that we may be going back on May 20th, I looked at this and I kind of knew it was going to be difficult for us to address our congressional districts between now and the midterms, because we do have laws in the books. And look, call me old-fashioned, but I like to abide by the laws that we have in place, right? And our laws require a certain number of days to be open for qualifying, and then a certain number of days for ballots to be drawn and for elections to be held. And the time frame was very narrow. And just to give you an idea, if we started on June 1st with a qualifying, so we'd have to open qualifying again for these districts, not to mention the fact we have to throw out a primary election, which I think is unprecedented and makes a lot of people uncomfortable doing that. But, you have 30 days there, then you have 60 days for creating the ballot and a 45-day period for a primary election, a potential for a 4-week runoff, 10 days on top of that to verify election results, and then you have another 60 days for the general election. And when you look at that, the time frame, if we started on June 1st, was going to extend beyond that November election date. So we were really very crunched and even looking at this. And I think the governor made the right decision by not bringing us back to look at that now. That's something that we certainly shouldn't rush. We shouldn't be pressured into doing. I get the reasons. Look, I don't think any of the Republicans in the state, the governor included, are very happy with the job that Representative Benny Thompson is doing. But we've got to look at the law. We've got to actually let facts matter here. And it was going to be a tough thing for us to do between now and the midterm.
So on a casual sort of basis, someone who would know about this sort of stuff suggested to me that there's some obscure provision in our law that would allow the caucuses to choose nominees for our congressional districts. Is that something you're familiar with?
I'm not very familiar with that, but again, that's something that, look, if we're doing something that's not ordinary and not normal enough for us to already be well versed and be able to talk about it and do it, why create a special circumstance to do that? Because it's so easy to mess something up when you're trying to do something. And look, I had some very wise people when I first got into office in 2020, and we were looking at different departments and different divisions and different statewide offices, and they said, look, you can't look at who's holding office right now and make big decisions based on that one individual person, because the voters will elect new people eventually. Now, of course, look, Benny Thompson's been there a long time. I've never been a fan of his, but he keeps getting reelected. And so, do we want to go redraw the rules and do something completely out of the ordinary for this one instance, even when we're dealing with a time frame crunch that I just mentioned? Because those ballot time frames, if we let caucuses pick, you still have those 60 days on top of 60 days, plus the verifying the elections. It's a very, very tight crunch for us if we were going to try to get this in by the midterms. And Gerard, really, that's why I think we're not hearing directly from President Trump putting his finger on the scale and saying, look, you need to do this. I think he understands that.
Yeah. So along these lines, this is a story that's fairly recent, as in this morning. The Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, she's not happy about the Supreme Court decision, the Calais decision in Louisiana that opened up this whole can of worms. But she also, it's being referenced that there is a Mississippi case that the court today sent down to a U.S. District Court, quote, for further consideration following the Calais ruling. Are you familiar with this case? I can't. What's it all about?
Yeah, so this obviously just happened this morning,
right.
But the little bit that I've looked at, I think that's dealing with our state legislative districts.
Okay.
So as everybody knows, a couple of years ago, we had to go redraw because the federal court said, you need to redraw these districts. There need to be some more majority districts drawn in. And I think what the Supreme Court has done is says, look, since the Calais decision, that's not, racial gerrymandering is not constitutional, so you can't do that. So even though our Attorney General wasn't asking them to look at that specifically, I think they were asking to look at who has standing to bring those cases. Lo and behold, we now have the Calais case, and the Supreme Court looked at that and said, well, look, if this was racial gerrymandering, or that if Mississippi was required to look at racial gerrymandering in redrawing these districts, they need to go back and look at this again. So if that order is vacated, we may go back to the legislative districts we drew a couple of years ago.
Wow. And then our friends in DeSoto County have also pointed out that there are a couple of judgeships, right, that were also, they believe, are drawn with this racial component, that ought to be redone.
That's right. Everything we've done with the census and that we did based on, mandates that have been in place for a long time based on our understanding of the law, and the pre-Calais, which is, fairly recent, the pre-Calais decisions were to look at things like BVAP, which is black voting age population, and how that affects each individual districts. And now the Supreme Court has says you do not look at race. The only thing you can't do, and I agree with this, you can't intentionally draw out or draw districts to hurt minority groups. You can't do that intentionally, which is a great ruling, by the way. But if we were looking at things like race and putting in different groups in these districts, we don't have to do that anymore. And what the Calais case says is we should not do that.
Yeah. Basically, it says you can't discriminate. Either way, it doesn't really matter who's being discriminated against. You can't engage in any sort of discriminatory practices in drawing these districts. I mean, it just makes sense.
That's right. It does. And look, the part that makes this so difficult and such a big issue is that in America, we have both of our political parties have moved towards identity politics and trying to lump people into their own systems. So all of this this fighting and bickering is created, frankly, by the political parties themselves in trying to do that. So I really like this decision. I hate identity politics. I like looking at policy and issues. I will say that the Republican Party, especially under the leadership of Chairman Hurst and Rance Bilbo and that organization right now, has made huge strides to reach out to minority groups and talk to them about the Republican Party platform and try to bring them in. So I like that. I wish that Democrats would do the same thing. And I think that maybe some are trying to do that and are willing to look beyond these identity politics situations to try to get back to policy and having fair debates and discourse that is good for all of Mississippi.
Hang on, Senator. We got a break right now. We can keep talking after it. We got Senator Jeremy England on the line with us. Stay with us, folks. We're in the Element Wealth studio. We're coming right back.
Agup's Drive Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's do this.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Let's go.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio. I want to fit this in here. This is from Wayne in Batesville. He says, as an election commissioner who's no fan of the governor, I have to agree with him. We've already had a primary, and updating maps in the statewide election management system would be a nightmare. I think Benny is a disgrace, but let's just balance his district next time. I just wanted to pass that on to you there, Senator, that there seems to be kind of a split opinion on this. You're seeing people, in fact, some people who have run for political office, especially, even including for governor in the past, have come out and have really excoriated Governor Reeves for not calling a special session to draw Congressman Thompson out. And you know the White House is exerting some pressure on as well, but like you said, maybe they're also considering the fact that we've already held primaries here and it would be extremely sticky. Because you know what's happened in Louisiana, Florida, a couple of other states that are doing this, maybe even Tennessee. Well, Tennessee is. They're scurrying about to get all this done. Just like Wayne's telling us, to get everything updated, to get ready to conduct primaries. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, it's a difficult process, and Wayne knows as election commissioner, I talk with election commissioners all the time, and by the way, let me say this, We need poll workers in Mississippi. So if you're listening to this and you've never served as a poll worker, please go sign up to do that because it's very important. But to get back to the topic, yes, look, this is a wedge issue. So people who are going to look, Republicans don't like Benny Thompson. They don't like Benny Thompson primarily because of his policy. I'll tell you, the first time I met Benny Thompson was in 2001, I believe. I was on a trip in Washington, and he said, look, I've been told I'm a liberal. I don't really know what that means, but to me, he said, when I go to church, he said, my pastor tells us to reach down into our pockets and drop into the offering plate and give liberally. And I was thinking, well, that's not your money, that's taxpayer money. So that right away, I knew, look, this guy's not with me on policy. And so, look, Republicans want to get rid of Benny Thompson. That's no secret. But we don't have to do it by redrawing these districts, and we don't have to do it so hastily. We have to be mindful of things like, the state of Mississippi is historically divided into different regions that have different areas of concern. The Delta is a very big agricultural population, whereas the coast relies a lot on military and federal spending and things like that, and our coastal agriculture type issues. And that's important for us to have representation in Congress that looks at those things. So all of the political gurus that are drawing these maps and putting them on social media, they've had AI do these maps and they look great and everybody thinks, oh, look at these bright red maps that we could have. It's really not that simple. And I think that's why the governor has decided to take a step back, let us have a chance to look at this. The speaker has formed a committee to look at this. The lieutenant governor has formed a committee. I'll be a member of that committee to look at this. And there's going to be a lot of math and a lot of things to go into this to make sure that all Mississippians are fairly represented in Congress, in Washington, in a way that benefits us all. Look, we've come a long way in Mississippi. I hate that this racial issue keeps jumping in, but we can't avoid our history, of course. But we've got to collectively move beyond that and do what's best for our state. And to me, that's looking at policy that benefits all Mississippians.
Yeah, I agree with you. And something else I've pointed out on the show, and I'll just share it with you while you're on with us, is that the fact that the term BVAP, the acronym and the term, even exists indicates there's a racial component in our drawing of various districts.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And look, that's part of our history that's kind of stuck to us up, and look, back in the 50s and the 60s, I don't think any of us can ignore the fact that it was probably needed.
Sure.
We had leadership that was drawing minority representation out, and they were trying to prevent minorities from voting and from doing things like that. We've come a long way from that. Things that we're doing now aren't based on that. Now, we do have to move on from our history at some point and do things that are good for all of Mississippi. And I don't think, to most of us, to the vast majority of Mississippians, it doesn't matter what color the person that's in Washington is that's representing us, as long as they're representing Mississippi values, which I think are conservative, both fiscally and socially conservative values, and are being leaders in a way that brings everybody forward. Look, again, goes back to identity politics. I hate it. I feel like Republicans and Democrats are becoming like Israelis and Palestinians, where you just hate each other just for the sake of hating each other. You think the other side has evil intent, and your intent is completely out of love and truth. And we've got to get back to the point where our founders wanted us to have debate and to have discourse and to make challenges on ideas, because when you have that and you have a competition in ideas like that from two different sides, the best is always going to come to the top. So my hope, Gerard, and I don't know that I'd be joined by everyone in this, my hope is that we can get beyond that to where we can actually have debate and discourse, which I think we do in Mississippi. You don't see in Jackson what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. This argument that's going on right now seems to be pushing us towards that, and I do not want us to get to that point. I would much rather stay home with my family and be here if I'm going to be asked to go up to Jackson and just join a melee of discourse.
Yeah, I agree with you. And honestly, Senator, just in my observation of hanging around the Capitol quite a bit during the session, I see a fair amount of harmony, way more harmony than I do contention between the parties, between the races that support the parties. Represent the parties, I should say.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Look, sitting just behind me is Senator Albert Butler in the chamber.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, Albert Butler, he represents the Port Gibson area. He's on the phone every day with constituents. He returns more phone calls than probably anybody else in that chamber. And I told him one day, I said, Senator Butler, I wish we all worked as hard as you do on this. And look, he's a Democrat. I'm a Republican. We don't always vote the same way, but he's representing his constituency. I'm representing mine, and there's been some issues where he's come to me and said, hey, can you help with this? And I'll turn around and talk with him to get his ideas on something else. And the reason is because we don't hold each other in contempt. We don't just look at each other as having, nefarious designs and wanting to do the worst. We both want the ultimate goal of making Mississippi better for ourselves, for our employees, for our business creators, for our children, and sometimes talk and we'll find a better way to get there rather than my way or his way. And I think we need to keep it that way. That's how Mississippi grows to the top, which we've been doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've said on the show that I think regardless of party affiliation, I think we all want the same thing. It's just maybe a disagreement on how to achieve it more than anything else. I think people want safety. Right. They want safety. They want good health, access to health care. They want quality education. They want opportunity for their children. They want to be free. They want government out of their lives. And even people who support big government actually want that. They just look to government, I think, too frequently to solve certain problems.
Right. And as you and I know, there gets to be a point where you rely on the government too much to where you don't step out and improve yourself. And there needs to be that level. Government benefits are necessary for a lot of people, but they need to be temporary. And we need to get back to that. And I think in the Delta, you see high unemployment rates. You see high, a very low labor force participation rate, which is a bad thing. That means people are not working and somehow they're surviving. These are able-bodied people. These are workers that could be in the workforce that aren't in it. We've got to get beyond that. And the way we're going to do that is to talk together and to work together. Look, stay firm on our principles, which I will always do, but there's always ways that you can find a path to the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see where this goes. We got about a minute and a half, couple of minutes left. Something I wanted to talk about real quick is the SHIELD Act that you authored, which implements some degree of reform into our election systems. Tell the folks what that does real quick.
Yeah, very quickly. So the SHIELD Act is going to make sure that we only have U.S. citizens on our voter rolls in Mississippi. So our voter rolls are going to be run through what's called the SAVE database in Washington, D.C., not the SAVE Act. The SAVE database is the systematic alien verification for entitlements. So that's our best database to know who's a citizen. And if you're not a U.S. citizen, you're going to be taken off the voter rolls in Mississippi. Now, if a mistake is made, that's where you're going to have to get your birth certificate or a passport or go prove your citizenship. And I'm working with a few senators, particularly Senator Johnny Dupree and I are going to work to try to see if we can make it easier for you to get your birth certificate if you need to prove your citizenship. But this is, look, in Mississippi, we want integrity in our elections, and by making sure that only U.S. citizens are on our voter rolls, that's how we're going to accomplish that.
Senator Jeremy England from Mississippi's Grand Gulf Coast there has been our guest today. Thanks for coming on, Senator. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Gerard.
We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
From the Sebro.com.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. A little Sticks fooling yourself bumping us into this segment. Appreciate that, Rhino. That'll get you pumped up right there. So don't forget, it is Monday. That means it's a short show. Ricky Matthews, SuperTalk Outdoors, comes your way at 12:05 today. Now, Rhino was telling me on the break about the plight, the financial plight of many of America's august universities. They're struggling financially because it turns out they ain't got the number of customers they need, because to a great extent, they're peddling worthless degrees, worthless curricula. Share the folks some of the data you were telling me about.
Yeah, it'd be one thing if this were like, okay, one of these things happened one year, another thing happened another year. It would look a little less like a sharp decline. But within the last 6 to 8 months, you've had Clemson come out and announce they have over $1.5 billion in debt compared to their $1.2 billion endowment. Syracuse has reported they're closing or pausing 93 different programs. UNC Chapel Hill plans to cut spending by $90 million over the next 3 years. Duke reported they were laying off 600 employees and cutting their budget by $350 million. The Indiana Public Colleges announced that they plan to eliminate or merge 580 programs nationwide. The University of Oregon is projected a $65 million deficit this year. And it just goes on and on and on. And then you break it down a little bit, like, for instance, those 93 programs that they're shutting down or pausing at Syracuse. 93 programs staffed with faculty, ready to do whatever for students. We're serving a grand total of 258 students, with 55 of the 93 programs having 0 enrolled students.
So 253 for 93 programs.
258.
58. Okay. So 2.5 students per program. Did I do that math right? I believe so. Why do we have 93 programs? I think that's more than we had in the entire university when I was going to school. Why do we need all that? What are they teaching? Worthless garbage, I'm telling you. And then they complain because they don't have job opportunities, can't make any money. Incredible. So I think you're going to continue to see this. I really do. And don't be surprised. This is one of the reasons I've thought for many years that college athletics would ultimately be privatized. Don't be surprised if you don't see some of these universities start taking hard looks at their various athletic programs.
Because for some of these you can point to athletic spending. For others you can point to a drop in enrollment. I think all colleges and universities are going to face a pretty tough uphill battle in the years to come just because of population demographics. Like, if you look at the last fertility peak in the United States, it was in 2007. Well, fast forward, that's now.
Yeah.
Those kids would be going to college now. So if that's when fertility peaked, the coming years, you're going to see lower enrollment.
One of the many consequences of a lower birth rate. We've talked about this before. Elon Musk says we're running out of people. Literally. I saw a report last week that there are more diapers sold to adults in China and Japan than for infants, toddlers. Think about that. You don't even think about, you see diapers on the shelf in the various stores. I mean, you immediately think babies. I understand that in certain circumstances, incontinence is an issue. And thus adults must wear diapers. But who would have thought we'd have gotten to the point that more adults are buying diapers than households are for babies?
That's why it's always funny to me whenever somebody comes to China's defense and talks about, oh, well, China thinks in terms of centuries. China plays the long game. Is that why they implemented the one-child policy that's now coming to roost with their demographic makeup?
Totally correct. Yeah, that it's destroying their economy, and it's going to continue to take its toll. It's a problem here as well, not nearly to the severity that it is in China and in Japan as well. But in this country, the birth rate is pegged at 2.1 as necessary to replace attrition, death, essentially. We're at 1.6, so we're below the necessary 2.1 birth rate to keep the population level, not to increase it, to keep it level. So this is a problem that will affect many other areas besides college as well. Think about our Social Security and Medicare programs. They rely on people paying in to take care of the people taking out, older people. And then, of course, the workforce is a huge issue. That's what Musk points out, is that we need people to work, to produce. In spite of all this AI technology that might be displacing certain jobs, I personally believe there's a whole large number of new jobs that aren't even a twinkle in the eye that are going to be created as a result of these innovations. But we need people to do that. Yeah, it's a huge issue. Speaking of children, the largest children's hospital in the United States, that would be the Texas Children's Hospital in Houston. It agreed to stop administering puberty blockers and other gender transition treatments to children. It's paying $10 million in penalties, and it's also opening up a detransition clinic after an investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice and the state of Texas. You remember we had a little taste of this here at home, right, with UMMC. Had a department, at least a couple of physicians maybe that were involved in that, and that got exposed, and I think it quickly got shut down. But this is going on across the country. When we as a country, it seemed like, we're leaning so hard into this stuff. But now we're learning all kinds of negative downstream consequences of taking puberty blockers. The idea was some were positing that, okay, well, if you have your breasts removed now, you can just grow them back. Or if you have breast implants, you can take them off. It turns out that's easier said than done medically, right, from a clinical perspective. All kinds of problems.
Much less
associated
from an
with that
coverage perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, you can't just have breast.
The type of unscrupulous doctors that would take a hatchet to a perfectly healthy child are the kind of unscrupulous doctors that don't really care if your insurance covers your detransition.
That's totally true.
They're still going to get paid.
That is 100% true. So, related to this, I'm so fascinated by this whole gender thing. I know we talk about that a lot. It's still going on big time in this country, despite the fact that we have a new president that issued a series of executive orders that reversed the prior president's orders concerning DEI and also the radical gender ideology nonsense. And don't forget that Joe Biden essentially tried to outfit his cabinet, his administration, like a chessboard, as I used to say. One of them, one of those, to Senator England's point about the identity politics. Well, there's a congressional candidate in New York that's backed, no surprise, by the Muslim socialist New York City mayor, Zoran Mamdani. This particular candidate has called for taxpayer-funded sex changes and a trans Bill of Rights. Now, I'm looking at a photo of a rally recently conducted by this particular candidate. This would be New York State Assembly member Claire Valdez. No surprise, she is a far-left wacko Democrat campaigning to fill an open house seat in New York's 7th Congressional District. But I'm looking at a photo, and there's signage in the background of the large number of people that are surrounding her. And one of the signs, Rhino, says, "Just transition ahead." Another one says, "Fossil fuels kill." And another one says, "Governor Hochul, lower our energy prices, but no Trump pipeline deal." That was a pipeline in the state of New York because they happen to have some fracking opportunities there. Coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Polyumpa, Mississippi.
Are we going to do this? Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Keep rolling. 3, 2, 1.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back on the C-Spire text line. Don't we have illegal immigrants to fill the void? Talking about our declining birth rate and our birth rate at 1.6, which is short of the 2.1 necessary to keep our population at least level. No, that includes everybody inside the country. And so that's a problem. Now, a lot of the illegals have left on their own accord. Many others have been deported, and now the president's talking about deporting some of the dreamers as well. So we'll see where that goes. Yesterday, man, this was pretty neat. There was a big event on the National Mall called Rededicate 250. You know, our 250th birthday is around the corner. Big celebrations planned for that, of course, but this really was a Christian revival. And Gen Z came out in droves. I think this is a good thing. This is a good trend. But I think what impressed me most of all about this event was that the president, the vice president, and the Speaker of the House all delivered what I thought were very appropriate, inspiring remarks. And they talked about how it's necessary for us to rededicate our country to God and return to our Christian roots. You can't deny that. I know people like to. Now, the cool thing about it, though, Rhino, is our founders were smart enough, wise enough to know, even though they personally injected their Christian beliefs into our founding structure, our law, our documents, even though they did that, they also understood that a thriving, successful, productive nation needs freedom of religion. Now, the left always wants to say that any time there's anything remotely religious, mainly Christian, at some government function, event, document, whatever the case may be, they're all mad about Brooke Rollins sending out an email on Easter. Good grief. Oh, separation of church and state. That's not what the law says. It says you can't promote or endorse. That's not doing so. Sending a message, a positive message on Easter, that's not promoting a religion. Am I missing that? I don't think it is. But this was really good to see our leaders not hold back. And I started thinking, would this have happened if we were under a President Kamala Harris? Not no, but heck no. No way. No way this would have happened. They refused to acknowledge and recognize that the people who founded this country were Christians. You can't deny it. And guess what they were escaping? Oppression from monarchy that said, nope, you're going to think like this, believe like this, adhere to our principles, our way of life without exception, or you're going to be persecuted and ultimately prosecuted for it. they escaped that. Isn't that pretty much what, despite what AOC says, she's promoting this narrative now. Oh, no, it was all about the billionaires of the day. Wrong, AOC. You see, it turns out that the most valuable thing we all have, it's not money. It's that freedom. And guess what? You can't have a thriving, affluent society, and ours is, without freedom. Without that simple second paragraph in the Declaration of Independence, where we acknowledge uniquely in this country that we were founded on a creed. That creed is simply that our unalienable rights come from our Creator, not government. And in jolly old England, they were trying to say, oh no, the monarchy gives you your rights. No exceptions. And they said, okay, we're out of here. Literally, that's what happened. And they braved it across the Atlantic, risked everything, came here and said, nope, we're going to do it this way. We believe that our Creator, and that's what was acknowledged yesterday. And I thought it was a beautiful thing. I'm proud of our country for that. I'm proud of our leaders and the President, the Vice President, Speaker of the House. They cited and referenced and quoted Scripture. I thought that was great. We should not apologize for this. And guess what? That doesn't mean if you are a member of a different faith that you can't worship as you see pleased. We allow that. It's our Christian values, actually, that understand, right, that should be allowed. You're not hurting people. You're not taking people's stuff. Knock yourself out. That's pretty much it. That's what makes this country great. That's unique about this country. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are the rights bestowed upon us by our Creator. Government's job is to protect those rights. We're out of time here today. Back with you again tomorrow. Stay with us for Ricky Matthews, and stay safe, and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.